let's take a look at what your head nurse has to say at the birthing clinic where you practice.
Okay. It's hard for us to see such a high cesarean rate here because all of our patients are screened really well before they come here, and they need to be low-risk patients. So it's rare that we send someone out for a C-section. Sometimes we'll send somebody to the hospital because they're not progressing in labor, but they can do some things at the hospital that we can't do to get them to deliver vaginally. So we don't really see the rate of the high C-sections like we do probably in a big city. But we don't have liability like the doctors do. Each doctor carries their own if they have it. Now, we have some doctors here without liability insurance, but the Amish and Mennonite people don't normally sue, so they're not as concerned about it here.
Now, this is a freestanding birthing clinic, the oldest in Ohio, and has a very different population base than you work with, probably much lower risk than the population that Dr. Myers works with. And that obviously must contribute to your lower C-section rate.
It does on one hand, in that at the birthing center, we have the low-risk patients, but I also have many high-risk patients that we deliver at the hospital successfully. And we do VBACs, vaginal birth after cesarean, at our hospital. And I've actually gotten to have lots of patients transferred to my care from other doctors in other communities where their hospital will not allow that patient to have a trial of labor.
Dr. Myers, let's talk a little bit about vaginal birth after cesareans.
Okay.
Because that is something that really wasn't done much until the mid-1970s, and the reason for that was because we used to have what was called a classic cut when doctors performed a cesarean, and there was a greater likelihood of uterine rupture.
Right.
And at some point we started to do a low transverse cut, when we discovered it would be much safer to allow a woman, if she had a previous cesarean, to then deliver vaginally. Talk about that a little bit, and talk about how the attitude toward a vaginal birth after a cesarean changed.
Yeah, this is a good example of what we call a swinging pendulum in medicine. The attitude is one way for a while, and then it swings to the other way. But yes, when transverse cesarean sections started to become more common, that's where you cut across the lower uterine segment instead of up and down as a classical, like you were saying. We, in medicine, they found that there is not as large a rate of uterine rupture if you have a transverse incision. And when I say uterine rupture, is just what it sounds like. Usually during labor, the uterus can actually rupture open on the weak point, which is the old incision. It's a very serious situation. I've had 2 of them that I've been involved with, and the babies have died in both situations. But with the low transverse type of incision, we found that, medicine in general has found that you can actually have a normal labor after that and have less than a 1% chance usually of having that rupture happen. So we felt that was not too large of a risk, that we couldn't offer that, and in fact insurance companies started to promote it, and medical literature started to promote that because it put the woman at lower risk if they weren't having a C-section and not going through a operative procedure. However, and that's when the pendulum was kind of swung one way, and I'd say that's mostly in the first part of the 1990s, and then after the VBAC started to become more popular, more of them were being done, the rate of uterine rupture was a little bit higher than they had first predicted, and then of course the insurance companies got wind of that and started pushing hospitals and doctors to not do cesarean sections. And actually, after a lot of study, the American College of OBGYN actually came out with a statement saying it can be done. You can do a VBAC, but only if you've got continuous obstetric and anesthesia care in the hospital with the patient while they're in active labor.
Right. In '94, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said, as long as an anesthesiologist and a physician are readily available, that was the phrase. And then in 1999, they said if you want to do a vaginal birth after a cesarean, a doctor and anesthesiologist has to be immediately available. Just that one word change from readily to immediately changed the entire climate about whether or not hospitals would be willing to allow women to birth vaginally after a cesarean. Our local hospital here in Athens, Ohio doesn't permit vaginal birth after cesarean anymore. And we should talk about in fact, the cesarean section rate, we don't know the rate for 2005 yet, it hasn't come out, but the guess is that it's higher than the 29% that it was in 2004. And there are reasons to be alarmed about this. You mentioned the problems with placentas.
Right.
Very recent studies, and just in September of 2006, have shown 3 times higher maternal death rate in low risk, this is in low risk births, cesarean births, than in vaginal births, and almost 3 times higher infant mortality rate in these low risk elective cesarean sections. And a sensible reason for a cesarean that a lot of people talk about is, oh, it's safer for the baby. We don't know how labor is going to go, but oh, cesareans, you know how it's going to go. Now, this isn't quite, studies are showing this isn't quite true. Isn't that right?
That's correct. And what's interesting about that study is this is not death at time of delivery. This is death for the baby within the first 30 days of life. So there are some things like sudden infant death were shown to be higher. That's an unexplained death in a baby. So unexplained death is higher in a C-section baby than in a vaginal delivery under normal circumstances.
It's probably fair to say there's a lot about labor we don't understand. And there's a lot about the benefits of labor that we don't understand, whether it's hormones, whether it's pulmonary stimulation going through the birth canal, whether it's inhaling the mother's vaginal flora, who knows? Who knows what it is? But that's probably fair to say that there's a lot about labor.
I think that's true in medicine in general. I mean, you know, we think we know a lot more than we actually do most of the time.
Yeah.
So can you suggest some ways that cesarean section rates can be lowered very quickly?
I think it's a physician's job to educate their patients. When they come in and they've been reading about celebrities having these elective C-sections, we need to be honest with them that there is a certain amount of pain that is necessary in labor, either before or after. In normal vaginal delivery, you have the pain before, and then when you have the baby in your arms, you can enjoy that baby. And in elective C-section, you have all your pain afterwards, which makes it more difficult to bond with your baby. So people need to understand it's not pain versus no pain, it's when is that pain going to happen.
I want to thank both of you so much for being here. For upcoming episodes, viewer feedback, and links to important information, log on to our website that appears at your screen. Thanks so much for joining us on Health Vision, a production of WOUB Public Media Center.